I should have known something was wrong when Vera started wearing perfume to bed. My name is Leon Carter, and I've spent the last 15 years building a cybersecurity firm from nothing. Started in our garage, now we're pulling in 8 figures annually. But tonight, sitting in my home office watching my wife practice her acceptance speech in the mirror, I felt like the biggest fool in Massachusetts. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. How do I look, Leon? Vera adjusted her black evening gown for the 100th time. At 45, she still commanded attention when she walked into a room. Tonight's nonprofit gala would be her crowning achievement, the Humanitarian Leadership Award from the New England Charity Coalition. Like $1 million, I said, not looking up from my laptop. 3 security patches needed my approval before midnight, and frankly, I'd rather debug code than watch my wife rehearse another speech about helping the less fortunate. You're not even looking. Her voice had that edge I'd been hearing more often lately. Sharp, dismissive, like I was an employee who'd disappointed her. I glanced up. You look beautiful, Vera. You always do. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Damien says the speech needs more emotion, more personal connection. There it was. Damien Holt's name dropped into our conversation, like a stone into still water. For the past 6 months, Vera had been working with this hotshot political consultant on her nonprofit's public image. Every other sentence started with, Damien says, or Damien thinks. Since when do you need a consultant to tell you how to feel? I asked. Vera's reflection in the mirror shot me a look that could freeze hell. Since my husband started caring more about computer code than his wife's career. I closed my laptop. That's not fair, and you know it. Do I? She turned to face me, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor. When's the last time you asked about my work? Really asked, not just nodded while scrolling through your phone? The question hung in the air like smoke. She wasn't wrong, but she wasn't entirely right either. I'd built a company that employed 63 people. I'd created something from nothing while she gave speeches about creating change. There was a difference between doing and talking, but pointing that out would only start another fight. I'm asking now, I said. Tell me about tonight. Her expression softened slightly. The coalition is recognizing our work with homeless veterans. We've placed over 200 people in permanent housing this year. It's important, Leon. I know it is. I'm proud of you. Then act like it tonight, please. Don't disappear into your phone or make jokes during the serious parts. This matters to me. I stood up and walked over to her. I'll be the perfect husband. Scout's honor. She laughed, the first genuine sound I'd heard from her in weeks. You were never a Boy Scout. Details. I kissed her forehead. What time do we need to leave? The car's coming at 7. Damien's meeting us there with the final speech notes. Of course he was. I checked my watch. 6:15. Enough time to shower and put on the tuxedo that made me feel like a trained SEAL. Leon? Vera's voice was softer now, almost vulnerable. Thank you for supporting this. I know charity galas aren't your thing. Hey, free dinner and a chance to watch my wife accept an award? What's not to love? But as I headed upstairs to get ready, I couldn't shake the feeling that tonight was going to change everything. In my line of work, you develop instincts about security breaches. Something was probing our defenses, looking for weaknesses. I just didn't know the attack was coming from inside the house. The Marriott downtown was buzzing with Massachusetts nonprofit elite when our car pulled up. Vera had been quiet during the ride, checking her phone constantly. Every buzz made her jump slightly, and she'd angle the screen away from me when she read her messages. Nervous? I asked as we walked through the lobby. Always. She squeezed my arm. But good nervous. Like opening night nervous. The ballroom was decorated in the coalition's colors, deep blue and gold. Round tables filled the space, each one representing a different organization. Our table was near the front, marked with a small placard, Carter Family Foundation, Platinum Sponsors. That had been my contribution to Vera's cause. $250,000 annually to help fund her programs. Money well spent if it made her happy, even if I sometimes wondered how much of it actually reached the people who needed it. "Leon, Vera!" a smooth voice called out behind us. I turned to see Damien Holt approaching with the confidence of a man who'd never been told no. Tall, silver-haired, wearing a tuxedo that probably cost more than most people's cars. He had the kind of smile that made you want to count your fingers after shaking his hand. "Damien." I nodded politely. The man of the hour. He clapped me on the shoulder like we were old friends. "Ready to watch your wife make history?" "Looking forward to it." Damien turned his full attention to Vera, and I might as well have vanished. "You look absolutely stunning. That dress is perfect. Elegant but approachable, exactly what we discussed." "We?" I filed that away for later consideration. "The final speech notes," he continued, handing Vera a small card. "I made a few tweaks to the closing. Trust me, there won't be a dry eye in the house." Vera read the card, her eyebrows rising slightly. "This is different from what we practiced." "Better," Damien said. "More authentic. More you." I glanced at the card, but Vera folded it quickly and slipped it into her purse. "I should probably review this before—" "No time," Damien interrupted. "They're starting the program in 5 minutes. Besides, you know this material better than anyone. Just speak from the heart." Something cold settled in my stomach. In cybersecurity, we have a term for this kind of last-minute change: a Trojan horse. It looks helpful, even necessary, but it's designed to breach your defenses when you're most vulnerable. "Maybe I should take a look at those notes," I suggested. Damien's smile never wavered, but his eyes went flat. "I don't think that's necessary, Leon. This is Vera's moment." "Leon doesn't need to micromanage everything," Vera said, but there was something strained in her voice. "I've got this." The lights dimmed, and a voice over the sound system asked everyone to take their seats. As we walked to our table, I noticed Damien's hand on the small of Vera's back, guiding her like she belonged to him. That's when I knew for certain. Tonight wasn't about Vera receiving an award. Tonight was about me losing everything. The dinner portion of the evening crawled by with the usual non-profit theater, auction items nobody really wanted, speeches about making a difference, and enough wine to make everyone forget how little of their donations actually helped people. I smiled, nodded, and played the role of the supportive husband while my instincts screamed that something was wrong. Vera barely touched her food. She kept checking her phone under the table, and twice I caught her exchanging meaningful looks with Damien, who was seated 3 tables away with the coalition board members. "You okay?" I whispered, during a particularly boring presentation about sustainable housing initiatives. "Just nervous," she whispered back, but her hand was shaking slightly as she reached for her water glass. The master of ceremonies, a local news anchor with too much hair gel, finally approached the podium for the main event. "Ladies and gentlemen, it's my honor to present this year's Humanitarian Leadership Award to a woman who has dedicated her life to serving others." Standard award show patter. I'd heard variations of it dozens of times, but as the introduction continued, I noticed something odd. The speech wasn't just about Vera's work. It was about her personal sacrifices, her commitment despite challenges at home, her dedication to the cause, even when others couldn't understand her passion. What the hell did that mean? "Please welcome Vera Carter." The applause was enthusiastic as Vera rose from her seat. She kissed my cheek, a quick perfunctory gesture, and walked to the stage. Under the lights, she looked radiant and confident. This was her element. "Thank you so much for this incredible honor," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the ballroom. "When I started this work 5 years ago, I never imagined it would lead to moments like this. I settled back in my chair, prepared for the usual gratitude speech. Thank the board, thank the volunteers, thank the donors, thank the husband. Standard operating procedure. But as Vera continued, her words took an unexpected turn. They say it takes a village to create real change, she said, pulling out the small card Damien had given her. But sometimes it takes finding your true partner, someone who believes in your vision not just with their wallet, but with their heart. A murmur went through the crowd. This wasn't typical acceptance speech territory. For too long, I felt like I was fighting this battle alone. Oh, I had support, financial support, logistical support, but I didn't have a true partner. Someone who understood that this work isn't just a hobby or a tax write-off. It's a calling. My chest tightened. Where was this going? 6 months ago, that changed. I found someone who didn't just write checks. He rolled up his sleeves. He didn't just nod politely at dinner parties. He challenged me to think bigger, dream bigger, be bigger. The room had gone completely silent. I could feel eyes turning toward me, but something in Vera's tone told me this praise wasn't coming my way. So tonight, I want to publicly thank my real partner in this work, the man who helped me find my voice, my courage, and my true calling. Damien Holt, would you please stand? The world tilted sideways. Damien rose from his seat, that practiced smile spreading across his face as he nodded graciously to the applause. But it wasn't just polite applause. It was warm, knowing, like the crowd was in on something I'd missed entirely. Damien has been more than a consultant, Vera continued, her voice growing stronger. He's been my guide, my confidant, and yes, my partner in every sense of the word. None of this would have been possible without him. Partner, in every sense of the word. The phrase hit me like a physical blow. Around me I could hear whispers starting, see heads turning in my direction. Some faces showed sympathy, others curiosity, a few barely concealed excitement at witnessing a public meltdown. Together we're going to take this work to the next level, Vera said, looking directly at Damien instead of the audience. We're going to build something beautiful and lasting, something real. I stood up, not dramatically, not angrily. I simply rose from my chair, straightened my jacket, and walked toward the exit. My legs felt disconnected from my body, but my mind was crystal clear. Behind me, Vera's voice continued, but I wasn't listening anymore. I pushed through the ballroom doors into the hotel lobby, where the sudden quiet felt like a blessing. My phone buzzed. Text message from Miles, my COO. Watching the live stream. What the hell, Leon? Then another from Tessa, my head of PR. Please tell me you have a statement ready. And another from a number I didn't recognize. Brutal, man. Absolutely brutal. I turned off my phone and walked outside into the cool October air. The valet looked at me expectantly, but I waved him off. I needed to walk. I needed to think. 23 years of marriage, 15 years building a company, $250,000 a year supporting her nonprofit. And this was how it ended, with her thanking another man for being her real partner in front of 300 people and a live stream audience. But as I walked through downtown, my initial shock began crystallizing into something else, something colder and more focused. In cybersecurity, we have protocols for when a system is compromised. First, you isolate the breach, then you assess the damage. Finally, you implement countermeasures to prevent future attacks. Vera had just declared war on me in the most public way possible. She'd humiliated me, destroyed my reputation, and apparently been conducting an affair with my money funding her platform. Time to show her what a real security breach looked like. I pulled out my phone and turned it back on. 17 missed calls, 43 text messages, and 12 voicemails. But I ignored them all and opened my banking app instead. The Carter Family Foundation account showed a balance of $127,000, money I'd transferred last month for Vera's programs. With a few taps, I moved every penny into my personal account. Then I opened my email and typed a message to the coalition's board of directors. Effective immediately, I am terminating all financial support from Carter Cybersecurity and the Carter Family Foundation to the New England Charity Coalition and its affiliated organizations. This decision is final and non-negotiable. Leon Carter, CEO. Send. My phone immediately started ringing. I let it go to voicemail and started walking back toward the hotel. By the time I reached the Marriott, the valet was dealing with a crowd of people streaming out of the ballroom. The gala had apparently ended early. Through the lobby windows, I could see Vera surrounded by a small group of people. Even from a distance, I could tell she was upset. Damien stood beside her, one hand on her shoulder in a gesture that was probably meant to look supportive, but came across as possessive. My phone buzzed with a call from Vera. I declined it and headed for the parking garage. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. Tonight had been her opening move, a devastating attack designed to destroy me publicly while positioning herself as the victim of an unsupportive marriage. But she'd made one crucial mistake. She'd assumed I would just take it, that I would quietly accept the humiliation and write her a check for the privilege. She was about to learn why I'd been successful in cybersecurity for so long. When someone breaches your system, you don't just patch the vulnerability. You make sure they never want to try it again. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat in my home office with a pot of coffee and 3 laptops, doing what I do best, gathering intelligence. The first step was damage assessment. The gala live stream had been viewed over 15,000 times in 12 hours. Local news sites were already running stories with headlines like "Nonprofit Leader Thanks Real Partner in Emotional Speech" and "Carter Foundation Pulls Support After Wife's Award Ceremony." The comment sections were brutal. Half the people called me a controlling husband who couldn't handle his wife's success. The other half recognized the situation for what it was, a very public declaration that my marriage was over and I'd been funding my own humiliation. But I wasn't interested in public opinion. I was interested in facts. I started with Damien Holt. LinkedIn showed an impressive resume. Harvard MBA, 15 years in political consulting, clients including 3 governors and a dozen congressional candidates. His firm, Holt Strategic Communications, was based in Boston with satellite offices in New York and Washington. His personal social media was more revealing. Photos from charity events, political fundraisers, and upscale restaurants. Always impeccably dressed, always with a different attractive woman on his arm. Until 6 months ago, when the photos started featuring Vera. Not obviously, they were careful. But I knew what to look for. The way they stood just a little too close at public events. How his hand lingered on her back when he guided her through crowds. The intimate smiles they shared when they thought no one was watching. My doorbell rang at 7:30 a.m. Through the security camera, I saw my neighbor, Harold Feldman, holding 2 cups of coffee and wearing the expression of a man who'd witnessed a car accident. Harold was 73, a retired private investigator who'd spent 30 years working insurance fraud cases. He'd moved in next door 5 years ago, and we'd developed an unlikely friendship based on our shared appreciation for Scotch and suspicious minds. "Figured you might need this," he said, handing me a coffee when I opened the door. "That bad, huh?" "I've seen worse," Harold said, settling into one of my kitchen chairs. "But not much worse. You want to talk about it?" I gave him the basic outline. The speech, the public humiliation, Vera's obvious affair with Damien. Harold listened without interruption, occasionally nodding like he'd heard variations of this story before. "So what's your play?" he asked when I finished. "Still working on that." Harold smiled grimly. "No, you're not. I've been watching you for 5 years, Leon. You're not the type to get mad. You get even. And you're too smart to do anything stupid. So what's the plan?" I walked over to my laptop and showed him what I'd found. Damien Holt has been very busy the past 6 months. 3 new clients, all of them connected to nonprofits. all of them requiring extensive image consulting with attractive female executives. Pattern of behavior, Harold nodded. Guys got a type. More than that, look at this. I pulled up financial records I'd accessed through perfectly legal channels, public filings, charity databases, corporate registrations. Every organization he's worked with has seen a significant increase in donations during his consultation period. Then, mysteriously, those donations dry up right after he moves on to his next client. Harold leaned forward, studying the screen. He's running a con. A sophisticated one. He targets successful women in high-profile nonprofit positions, seduces them, convinces them they need his services, then uses his connections to funnel money toward their organizations. The women think he's a miracle worker, fall for him personally and professionally. And then he disappears with whatever he can grab, leaving them holding the bag when the donations stop coming. Harold whistled softly. Your wife's his current mark. Looks that way, except this time, he hit the jackpot. Instead of just seducing a nonprofit executive, he seduced one whose husband was writing $250,000 checks. Was being the operative phrase? Exactly. I closed the laptop. But here's the thing. I don't think Vera knows it's a con. I think she genuinely believes she's found her soulmate and business partner. Which makes this harder, Harold said. If she was just cheating, you could expose that and move on. But if she thinks she's in love, she'll fight for him, defend him, maybe even help him when things go bad. Harold finished his coffee and stood up. You need more than financial records and social media photos. You need proof of the pattern, evidence that shows what he really is. I know, but I'm a cybersecurity guy, not a private investigator. Harold smiled. Good thing you know one. He left with a promise to make some calls to old contacts in Boston. Meanwhile, I had my own calls to make. The first was to Miles at the office. How bad is it? Could be worse, Miles said. 3 clients called this morning asking about the news coverage. I told them it was a personal matter that wouldn't affect our services. 2 of them seemed satisfied. The third wants a meeting. Set it up. And Miles, start documenting everything. Every client interaction, every project milestone, every financial transaction. If this gets ugly, I want a paper trail that shows our business is rock solid. Already on it. Tessa's drafting a statement about separating personal and professional matters. Good. Keep me posted. The second call was to my lawyer, Janet Morrison. I'd known Janet for 10 years. She'd handled our corporate legal work and the occasional contract dispute. But I'd never needed her for family law. I'm sorry about last night, Leon, she said. I saw the coverage. That had to be difficult. It was enlightening. I need to discuss divorce proceedings. Of course. Can you come in this afternoon? We'll need to talk about asset division, alimony, the business. Janet, there's something else. I have reason to believe Vera's relationship with this consultant isn't just personal. I think she's being conned, and I think my money might be involved. A pause. That's a serious allegation. I know. But if I'm right, it changes everything about how we handle this. Come in at 2 o'clock. Bring everything you have. The third call was the hardest. I dialed Vera's number, not sure if she would even answer. Leon. Her voice was cold, formal. I suppose we need to talk. We do, but not over the phone. Fine. I'm staying at the Marriott for a few days. Room 1247. Of course she was, probably in a suite paid for by Damien's expense account. I'll be there at noon. Leon, last night wasn't how I wanted you to find out. Find out what, exactly? A long pause. That I'm in love with someone else. The words should have hurt more than they did. But after a sleepless night of research and planning, they just felt like confirmation of what I already knew. See you at noon, Vera. I hung up and stared out the window at Harold's house. He was right about one thing. I wasn't the type to get mad. I got even. But first, I had to make sure I understood exactly what I was dealing with. Because if Damien Holt thought he could destroy my marriage, steal my wife, and disappear with my money, he was about to learn a very expensive lesson about cybersecurity. Sometimes the best defense is a devastating offense. Room 1247 was a corner suite with a view of Boston Harbor. Vera answered the door in jeans and a sweater, more casual than I'd seen her in months. Without makeup and designer clothes, she looked younger, but also more fragile. "Thank you for coming," she said, stepping aside to let me in. The suite was elegant, but impersonal, like an expensive hotel room should be. A bottle of champagne sat unopened on the coffee table next to two glasses. Celebrating something or preparing to? "Nice room," I said. "Damien's expense account?" Vera's jaw tightened. "He's trying to make this easier for me." "I'm sure he is." We stood there for a moment, 23 years of marriage reduced to awkward silence in a hotel suite. Finally, Vera gestured toward the couch. "Sit, please. We need to discuss how we're going to handle this." I remained standing. "Handle what? Your affair? Your public humiliation of me? Or the fact that you've been using my money to fund your relationship with another man?" "It's not like that." "Then explain it to me. Because from where I stand, it looks like you've been lying to me for months while I wrote checks to support your career." Vera's composure cracked slightly. "You want to know the truth? Fine. Yes, I'm having an affair with Damien. Yes, I'm in love with him. And yes, I want a divorce." Finally, some honesty. But it's not about the money, Leon. It was never about the money. Then what was it about? She walked to the window, looking out at the harbor. "When's the last time you asked me about my day? Not the nonprofit stuff, not the public events, just my day. How I felt, what I was thinking, what I needed." I ask. "No, you don't." She turned back to face me. "You nod and make appropriate sounds while you check your email. You write checks and show up to events, but you're never really there. Not for me." The accusation stung because it wasn't entirely wrong, but it also wasn't entirely fair. I built a company, Vera. I created something that employs 63 people and generates enough revenue to fund your nonprofit work. That doesn't happen by accident. I know, and I'm proud of what you've built. But somewhere along the way, you started treating our marriage like another business transaction. Input the required effort, get the expected output. And Damien doesn't? Damien sees me, really sees me. He believes in my work, not just as a tax write-off, but as something meaningful, something important. I pulled out my phone and showed her the financial research I'd compiled. "Your meaningful work is a con, Vera. Damien Holt has run this exact same game on at least 3 other women in the past 2 years. She glanced at the screen, then looked away. "I don't know what you think you've found. Look at it." I moved closer, holding the phone where she couldn't avoid seeing it. Sarah Mitchell in Hartford, Rebecca Torres in Providence, Jennifer Walsh in Burlington, all nonprofit executives, all had affairs with Damien, all saw massive donation increases during his consultation period. Want to guess what happened after he moved on? Vera's face had gone pale, but her voice remained steady. "You're making this up. Call them. I have their numbers. You investigated me? I investigated him. There's a difference." "No, there isn't." Her voice rose. "You can't stand that I found someone who actually cares about me, so you're trying to destroy it with lies and manipulation. I'm trying to save you from making a mistake that will ruin your career and your reputation." "My reputation?" She laughed bitterly. "You destroyed that last night when you pulled funding in the middle of my acceptance speech. Do you have any idea what that looked like? It looked like a husband who'd been publicly humiliated and decided to stop paying for the privilege. It looked like a controlling man who couldn't handle his wife's success." We stared at each other across the hotel suite, 23 years of marriage dissolving into recriminations and hurt feelings. But underneath my anger, I felt something else, genuine sadness for what we'd lost and what Vera was about to lose. "He's going to disappear," I said quietly. Maybe not today, maybe not next week, but soon. And when he does, you'll be left holding the bag for whatever promises he made. You're wrong. I hope I am. But when I'm proven right, don't come asking for money to clean up the mess. Vera walked to the door and opened it. I think you should leave. I headed for the exit, then paused. For what it's worth, you weren't wrong about everything. I did get caught up in the business. I did take our marriage for granted. But I never betrayed you, Vera. I never humiliated you in public or made you question your worth. Maybe you should have, she said. Maybe if you'd shown some passion about anything other than computer code, we wouldn't be here. I left her standing in the doorway and took the elevator down to the lobby. My phone was buzzing with missed calls and text messages, but I ignored them. Instead, I walked out into the October afternoon and called Harold. How did it go? He asked. About as expected. She's convinced she's in love and she thinks I'm trying to sabotage her happiness out of spite. Classic con-victim response. The mark always defends the grifter, even when presented with evidence. Did you find anything? More than you want to know. Can you meet me at Murphy's bar in an hour? Murphy's was a dive bar near the waterfront that served decent burgers and minded its own business. Harold was already there when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth with a manila folder and 2 beers. Jennifer Walsh was willing to talk, he said, sliding one of the beers across the table. Damien worked with her organization in Burlington for 4 months last year. Same pattern. Seduced her. Convinced her she needed his services. Brought in a bunch of new donors. And then? And then he disappeared 2 days before a major fundraising gala, taking $60,000 in consulting fees and leaving her with a bunch of bounced checks from donors who turned out to be fictional. I opened the folder. Photos, financial records, email printouts, and a signed statement from Jennifer Walsh detailing her relationship with Damien Holt. She's willing to testify if it comes to that, Harold said, but she wants assurance that her name won't be dragged through the media. What about the others? Still working on them, but Jennifer gave me something interesting. He pulled out a photograph showing Damien at a restaurant with an older man in an expensive suit. That's Marcus Webb, a private equity guy from New York. According to Jennifer, he was one of Damien's donors. Except after Damien disappeared, she found out Marcus had never heard of her organization. Fake donor? Gets better. I ran Marcus through some databases. He's got connections to at least a dozen shell companies, all of them involved in charity fraud schemes. I think Damien's not just a con man. He's part of a larger operation. The implications hit me like a physical blow. If Vera was involved with an organized fraud ring, even unknowingly, it could destroy her completely. And since I'd been funding her nonprofit work, I could be implicated as well. How long before they make their move? I asked. Based on the pattern? Soon. Probably right after your wife's organization receives a few more large donations. Then they'll clean out the accounts and disappear. I finished my beer and closed the folder. I need to stop this. Leon, be careful. If these people are as connected as I think they are, going after them could be dangerous. More dangerous than letting them destroy my wife and potentially implicate me in charity fraud? Harold nodded grimly. Point taken. What do you need? Time to think, and maybe a way to get Vera somewhere safe while I figure out how to expose Damien without destroying her in the process. You still care about her. Of course I do. 23 years doesn't disappear overnight, even after what she did. But as I drove home through the darkening streets, I realized that caring about Vera and protecting her might require doing something she would never forgive me for. Sometimes the only way to save someone is to become their enemy. 3 days later, everything went to hell. I was in my office reviewing quarterly reports when Tessa burst through the door without knocking. Her usually perfect composure was cracked, and she was holding her tablet like it might explode. Leon, we have a problem. A big one. What now? The FBI just raided Vera's nonprofit office, and they're asking questions about our donations. The coffee cup slipped from my hand, shattering on the floor. What? Tessa set her tablet on my desk, showing a live news feed from downtown. Federal agents were carrying boxes out of the New England Charity Coalition offices, while reporters shouted questions at anyone who would listen. It gets worse, Tessa continued. 3 other nonprofits connected to Damien Holt were raided simultaneously. The FBI is calling it Operation Clean Sweep, a multi-state investigation into charity fraud. I grabbed my phone and called Vera, straight to voicemail. Then I tried the hotel. I'm sorry, sir, but Ms. Carter checked out this morning. Harold, I said into my phone. I need you, now. He arrived 20 minutes later with more bad news. I've been monitoring police scanners all morning. Damien Holt is wanted for questioning in connection with the fraud investigation. So is Marcus Webb. And Leon. So is Vera. She doesn't know anything about the fraud. Maybe not, but she's been the public face of one of the organizations they're investigating, and her very public relationship with Damien makes her look complicit. I sank into my chair, trying to process the implications. If Vera was arrested, her reputation would be destroyed regardless of whether she was convicted, and if the FBI decided I was part of the conspiracy, there's something else, Harold said quietly. I think Damien saw this coming. My contact at the bureau says they've been watching him for months. He probably knew the walls were closing in. Which means what? Which means his relationship with your wife might have been an exit strategy. Get close to a wealthy woman, use her organization as a front for one last big score, then disappear before the hammer falls. My phone rang. Unknown number. Leon Carter. Mr. Carter, this is Agent Sarah Martinez with the FBI. I need to speak with you about your financial relationship with the New England Charity Coalition. I'll be right there. The FBI field office was a monument to bureaucratic efficiency. All concrete and fluorescent lights and people in serious suits carrying serious expressions. Agent Martinez was a compact woman in her 40s, with intelligent eyes and the demeanor of someone who'd heard every lie in the book. Mr. Carter, thank you for coming in voluntarily. I want to assure you that you're not currently a target of our investigation. Currently? We're trying to understand the scope of the fraud scheme and identify all the victims. Your donations to various nonprofits put you in a unique position to help us. She led me to a conference room where another agent was setting up recording equipment. For the next 2 hours, they walked me through every donation I'd made, every interaction I'd had with Damien, every conversation I'd overheard between him and Vera. Did your wife ever mention receiving unusual donations? Agent Martinez asked. Large amounts from donors she didn't recognize? No, but she didn't usually discuss the financial details with me. What about Damien Holt? Did he ever suggest ways to optimize your donations for tax purposes? Not to me directly, but I got the impression he was advising Vera on fundraising strategies. The agents exchanged glances. Mr. Carter, we believe your wife may have been manipulated by people who were using her organization to launder money from other fraudulent schemes. We don't think she was a willing participant. Relief flooded through me. Then why is she wanted for questioning? Because she disappeared this morning, along with Damien Holt, and because nearly $2 million in donations to her organization were transferred to offshore accounts yesterday. The room spun slightly. $2 million? Money that came from victims of other charity fraud schemes. Money that Mr. Holt and his associates were using your wife's organization to clean. And you think Vera helped them? We think Vera was convinced to authorize the transfers by someone she trusted, someone who told her the money was going toward a new program or facility. Agent Martinez leaned forward. Mr. Carter, if your wife is truly a victim in this scheme, the best thing she can do is come forward and cooperate with our investigation. But every hour she stays missing makes her look more complicit. I don't know where she is. We believe she's with Damien Holt, and we believe they're planning to leave the country. I left the FBI office with my head spinning and my phone full of messages from reporters, clients, and friends who'd seen the news coverage. But I ignored them all and drove straight to the one place I thought Vera might go. Our house was dark when I pulled into the driveway, but I could see a light in the back bedroom. I used my key to enter through the front door, moving quietly through the familiar rooms. I found her in our bedroom, packing a suitcase with shaking hands. She looked up when I appeared in the doorway, and I could see she'd been crying. "Leon, I didn't think you'd come here." "Where else would I go? This is my house." "I meant, after everything that's happened, I thought you'd want nothing to do with me." I sat on the edge of the bed, watching her fold clothes with mechanical precision. "The FBI thinks you're part of a money laundering scheme." "I know." Her voice was barely a whisper. "Damien explained everything. He said there was a misunderstanding that the transfers were legitimate, but that we needed to leave until it could be sorted out." "And you believed him?" "I wanted to believe him." She stopped packing and looked at me directly. "But then I remembered what you showed me at the hotel, about the other women, and I started wondering—" "Wondering what?" "Wondering if you were right. If I was just another mark in his con." I pulled out my phone and showed her the photos Harold had given me. Damien with Marcus Webb, financial records showing the fake donations, statements from Jennifer Walsh and the other victims. Vera studied each image, her face growing paler. "How long have you known?" "I suspected after your speech. I knew for certain after I talked to the FBI this afternoon." "You talked to the FBI?" "They wanted to know about my donations, about my relationship with Damien, about whether I thought you were involved in the fraud." "What did you tell them?" "The truth. That you were manipulated by someone you trusted. That you're a victim, not a criminal." Vera sat down heavily on the bed beside me. "I authorized those transfers, Leon. Damien said we were moving money to a new account for a housing project. I signed the papers. Under false pretenses. That makes you a victim of fraud, not a perpetrator. The FBI won't see it that way. Not after I ran. They might, if you turn yourself in, if you cooperate with their investigation. Damien said if I stayed, I'd be arrested, that they'd use me as a scapegoat while the real criminals got away." "Damien lied about everything else. Why would he tell the truth about this?" Vera was quiet for a long moment, staring at the suitcase in her lap. "I've been such a fool." "You fell in love with someone who turned out to be a criminal. That doesn't make you a fool. It makes you human. I destroyed our marriage for him. I humiliated you in public. I threw away 23 years for a man who was using me." "Yes, you did." She looked up, surprised by my bluntness. "But that doesn't mean you have to compound the mistake by running away with him. You can still do the right thing." "What if the right thing means going to prison?" "Then you go to prison. But you go as someone who made a mistake and tried to fix it, not as someone who ran away and made everything worse." My phone buzzed with a text message. "Harold. FBI has warrants out for both of them. Airports and border crossings are being monitored. Vera, where is Damien now?" "Waiting for me at a private airfield outside the city. He has a plane ready to take us to the Cayman Islands." "And after that?" "I don't know. He said we'd figure it out once we were safe." "You'll never be safe. You'll spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder, wondering when the FBI will find you. Is that really what you want?" Vera closed the suitcase and set it on the floor. "No, it's not." "Then let's call Agent Martinez. Let's end this the right way." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry, Leon. For everything. I know you'll never forgive me, but I'm sorry." I handed her my phone. "Make the call, Vera. Do the right thing." As she dialed the FBI number, I realized that this was probably the last conversation we'd ever have as husband and wife. Tomorrow, she'd be in federal custody. Next week, she'd probably be indicted. Next month, she'd be preparing for a trial that would determine the rest of her life. But at least she'd face it with some dignity intact, and at least I could sleep at night knowing I'd tried to save her, even after she'd tried to destroy me. Agent Martinez arrived 30 minutes later with a full tactical team, but they weren't needed. Vera surrendered voluntarily and provided them with Damien's location and travel plans. By midnight, he was in custody at the private airfield, along with $2 million in fraudulent charity donations. I watched from my front porch as they put Vera in the back of an FBI sedan. She looked back at me once through the rear window, and I raised my hand in what might have been a wave goodbye. The next morning, the news was full of stories about the charity fraud bust. Damien Holt and Marcus Webb were charged with conspiracy, money laundering, and wire fraud. Vera was charged as well, but the coverage made it clear she was considered a victim who had been manipulated into participating. My phone rang constantly with interview requests, but I ignored them all. Instead, I sat in my office and wrote a statement for Tessa to release. Carter Cybersecurity had no knowledge of any fraudulent activities connected to the organizations we supported. We are cooperating fully with the FBI investigation and are confident that the truth will emerge through the legal process. We will have no further comment while the investigation is ongoing. Short, professional, and designed to distance my company from the scandal without throwing Vera under the bus. 3 months later, Damien Holt was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. Marcus Webb got 12 years. Vera pled guilty to 1 count of conspiracy and received 2 years, with eligibility for parole in 18 months. I attended her sentencing hearing, but didn't speak to her. What was there to say? She'd made her choices, and now she was living with the consequences. But as I walked out of the federal courthouse that day, I realized something had changed. The anger was gone. The need for revenge had been satisfied not by anything I'd done, but by Damien's own greed and stupidity. He'd tried to con the wrong woman, and it had cost him everything. Sometimes the best revenge is just letting people destroy themselves.